welcome to the Incentives Workshop with Drip Drops. Today we are doing a deep dive into SIP 1694's incentives, and we are going to try to establish where we think incentives might best be suited and what incentives might best be suited, both positive and negative, carrots and sticks, to help maintain good governance behavior once we're fully into the Voltaire era. So to get started today, I just want to throw down some ground rules. This is a workshop, not a debate. I fully accept and understand that not everyone is happy with SIP 1694 and doesn't think that that's the correct approach. I have offered, and Pi Lanningham has also offered, that if you feel that is the case and you would like to write an alternative SIP, that we've offered our assistance in helping to formulate that, write it, and get it out for you. So today we are working under the assumption that SIP 1694 is going forward, and the community is going to vote on it, and we're going to implement whatever the final result of that is. And as such, today is a workshop on one of the topics of that area. So the rules for today are that we give each other mutual respect and courtesy. We take the time to listen to one another uninterrupted, let each person finish their thoughts, but also please keep our thoughts concise and try to keep them under 2 to 3 minutes at any one given time, so that each of us has the opportunity to speak and say what we need to try and build this forward. So first things first, what does the SIP say about incentives? It is, as we said, it's still under construction. So this is not the final revision, but what we're hoping to do is help to finalize some of the portions of that as we move forward here. The SIP does say that there's a bootstrap phase where things are basically going to remain the same. But after that bootstrap phase, there will be incentives to ensure that governance is being utilized properly, and those incentives are sometimes positive, sometimes negative, and there's been some pushback on that in the community. And so what we're hoping today is I'm hoping to kind of talk through some of those and why they're important, and then we'll go into and do our own exercise to try and look at places where incentives might makes the most sense. The biggest and most controversial of those negative incentives is that staking rewards will be held, not terminated. You won't lose your staking rewards, but you won't be able to claim your staking rewards unless you have delegated to a DREP your ADA for voting. Similar to, you can't get rewards if you don't delegate to a stake pool. This is, you've delegated to a stake pool, you also need to delegate to a DREP, and this incentive, this negative incentive, helps to build people toward that. There's been some talk about going the opposite direction, giving people rewards if they delegate, but unfortunately there's a limited budget because there's a limited treasury, and we don't know where those rewards could come from. So this is one of those areas that fell into a negative incentive area. The other most important area for incentives is the DREP incentive. This is considered a positive incentive. The DREPs will receive some kind of so far unspecified remuneration for the work that they do, investigating each of the different governance proposals, talking to their community and making sure they get a consensus or at least feedback from their community that says the way they need to vote, and then obviously casting their vote. What's interesting about the DREP incentives is that they can be either on-chain or off-chain, and the SIP leaves that up to discretion, and today we can actually discuss some of both. Now, the question is, why incentives? And I was just going to take a brief dip of the toe into game theory. There's an octagonal theory that I forget the exact words, octalytics. It's the founder of game theory gave us this approach, and it is basically the way the incentives are structured is he structures on an octagon, and your positive incentives are at the top, your negative incentives are at the bottom, and your incentives have sort of left brain and right brain connotations where some are more creative in nature and some are more analytical in nature, but there are these sort of 8 primary drivers, motivators that lead us to do the things that we want to do. It gets us motivated, and it helps us. And this comes from reviewing how people interact with games. And this theory is being held up here in our space. We already use some game theory. That's what the incentive model is, that gets people to stake in stake pools. Well, similarly, we're using game theory here to enforce the actions, to encourage the actions, to move people toward the desired behaviors. And when you're talking about governance, it's an important element of Cardano's existence. So using game theory and using incentives to actually get people to commit and do these things is an important step. So and as I said here, it's we're trying to enforce the expected behaviors. The expected behavior is actually really simple for ADA holders. It's select a delegate. That's it. Select a DREP. They don't have to do more than that. They're welcome to, and there can be incentives for doing more than that. But initially, the only thing we're asking them to do is take their ADA and delegate it. I'll roll it back a little. One of the places that you can delegate to is abstain, which is just a default position that says, hey, whatever happens, happens, and I'm just going to go along for the ride. That's an available option. So, and it's quite possible that people will take that option and start with it. The other option that you can delegate to without picking a person is no confidence. And the no confidence position is, I don't believe the system's working at all. That comes with a bunch of temperature checks and a bunch of like increasing degrees of pain for the government if the more people that are in that no confidence area. So someone perhaps that doesn't like 1694, maybe that's what they do, is they put their ADA in no confidence, to make the government's job harder until it goes the way they want it. It's totally fine. Again, it's part of game theory. You're actually putting the negative consequences on the government by doing that and forcing their hand to do more to try to get you to move from that no confidence state, especially as that state grows higher. Lastly, this whole thing with incentives is to ensure participation. We don't have a blockchain if we don't have transactions happening on the blockchain, and we don't grow and change as a community if we don't have a governance layer that helps us to implement the changes as they're coming. So there's two links here, the Figma board and SIP 1694. I'm going to actually post in the chat space in here right now the link that you guys need. Here it is. Okay, the Figma board is there in the link, so feel free to click that link and join in. And I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'll start sharing the Figma board. I guess I have to do it this way. There we go. And Figma, there we go. All right, got Doug in here. All right, so we're going to start here with a basic temperature check. Give everybody a moment to join in. I appreciate if everybody could participate in this. It's very helpful to have each person come in and take a look at this. Now, the governance temperature check for today is this statement: Cardano governance should include both rewards and punishments, positive and negative incentives, to ensure community participation in the governance process. And I'll just have you guys, click anywhere in that space, wherever you think, you agree strongly, you disagree, where do you stand in that space? And I'm zooming it out because I realized people could see right where they were clicking before. So I'm zooming it out to let you guys pick your place, how strongly you agree with that statement. And fair warning, I'm zooming back in. All right. And it may not surprise you guys, but I'm just going to say that I personally happen to strongly agree. I'm going to show the results for those of us that voted. And in this room, we pretty strongly agree that that definitely the Cardano governance needs to include both positive and negative incentives.
Can I add a caveat to that too, for my
Oh,
personal
yes.
opinion there?
Yeah,
I,
please do.
I do strongly agree, and also not just for the participation in the governance process, but the health of the governance process.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. And so, and I appreciate that, guys. That's what this is all about, right? Is us getting in and making these decisions as to what this looks like. And the hope is, again, this week might be a little bit light on participation here because of the other things going on in after town hall, but we'll be doing more of these sessions. We're going to try to do them every week for the foreseeable future, so that we get on different topics that come with SIP 1694, and including redoing this topic in the later time as well, to try to get more feedback for this. So this structure that I'm going on today, this structure is actually one that we've used in Longmont when we did the Longmont conference. What you do is you start at a sort of high level, and there's no right or wrong answers here. We're just adding incentives, both positive and negative, to the board here. It says we're going to just use sticky notes. So in Figma, if you look down at the bottom, they have this sticky note option here. You can change its color if you'd like, the traditional yellow, or go with whatever. And what we do is we each take a sticky note. And what you're doing is if you an incentive to this is in relation to the governance of SIP 1694. What's an incentive that can be used to encourage participation, whether it's a positive incentive or a negative incentive? So do you, as they said, the sort of the ones that we know about right now that are in there, withhold staking rewards until delegated to a DREP. Right, we know that one's there, so I'm gonna add that one in here because we know that's there. But do you have an idea of an incentive that needs to be added? I see Anthony came in. The Figma board, I just dropped the link again in the chat if you want to join in with us. So what we're doing right now, the first thing is that temperature check at the top, if you want to say whether or not you agree with the statement at the top. And then we're adding incentives to the incentive brainstorm. So where is a place that you can either pay a reward or extract a punishment if people Emilio, if you may have to sign in to Figma. If you're completely anonymous in Figma, I don't think it lets you participate until the accounts are free, just like Miro. You just have to add, sign into your account, and then it lets you participate on the board fully.
And I think you can sign in directly with Google too, without any kind of
extra Google, just your Google account or whatever is fine, right? So we're gonna take a few minutes now, and we're just gonna brainstorm on incentives. We're gonna, what are some places that we can add an incentive to this structure.
my mindset is still in the CPS that Rick started, so it's kind of hard for me to get out of that mind groove.
Hmm.
Got that. D-Rep fails the boat. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a ripe one, Chris, for sure. You can do them in separate sticky notes too. So like, because and I agree with you that the area of submission is a important one. So I'll talk through the process a little bit, maybe get the juices flowing a little here. So the end user takes their ADA, delegates to a DREP. The DREP then is empowered to vote. Proposals are created on the blockchain, on chain, and those proposals that are created on chain require a vote. The delegate, the DREP, has to either go to their community or not, and has to read the proposal or not. They're free not to, but that could have a very negative incentive that their delegates could leave in droves, right? That's another incentive that doesn't quite fit here, but it's sort of the relief valve, if you will, is that if you don't like what your DREP is doing, you have the freedom to leave right now. You grab your ADA and move it to another DREP right immediately. So, that's almost an overarching one, but I'll put it on here is, the ability to leave your DREP and go to another. That's an incentive, right? It ultimately is. And that's an incentive that hits a couple of different people, because you could always leave your DREP and go right into that bucket of no confidence, right? But we're,
Right.
this is the structure, and once the DREP has voted, the votes are tallied, and then the action is either implemented or not. And there's that last step through the constitutional committee that signs off or doesn't sign off on the constitutionality of the proposal, and then the proposal's implemented. And then there's cases where the Constitutional Committee obviously is not involved at all. It's the DREPs and the SPOs that are involved. And then there's another case where the SPOs are involved and the DREPs aren't. So that's another area of incentives. What are the incentives around the stake pool operators? You know, obviously theirs are it's kind of fluid. They have as much power as they have stake, much like the DREP does. But they have sort of that ultimate last veto because they have that ability to have an uncontrolled hard fork where they simply choose not to stay with the Cardano network as it stands and hard fork off to another one. And that's as it's been termed the nuclear option.
Yes.
So, I mean, these are some pretty good ones here. I think this is, again, a little easier if we have a little bit wider group with us thinking through these actions. But this is a pretty good. If any of you agree with the ones that are on there, there's a rubber stamp tool at the bottom. And if you could grab the rubber stamp tool and grab that +1, and let's just say, I like this one here that Chris has. I'm going to stick a +1 stamp on it. So if you guys don't mind going around, let's add some +1 stamps if we think that the item is important. If you feel like this one is one that you can get behind, add your +1 stamp to it. Obviously, if your name's on it, you already +1'd it. So. This one's interesting here, Chris, but I'm not. My question with the one person acting as multiple DREPs, I'm not sure. There's no on-chain way to verify that, right? There's really no way to do that. I won't say I disagree.
Yeah, I agree. There's not currently a way. And like I said earlier, my mindset has kind of been on, because there's so many different points of attack and how the system can be abused. I think we're going to end up, and I know this might be a little off topic, and I apologize, but we might end up needing a lot of different committees to handle different scenarios in an unbiased way. I don't know what that might look like.
You're getting into something with incentives that's very interesting that we really don't have yet. And so it's a good time is what I'll do now is I'm actually going to scroll down a little bit. I'm going to show you with the board down here. What we've got is the when structure. When is this appropriate? Is this a MVG item, a minimum viable governance option? Is it a post MVG? Does it happen after the minimum viable governance, or at some later date in the future, or is it entirely off chain? Right. So what you can do is basically, and this is the next step for me here, is that we take these items here. What we did in the Longmont conferences, we took these things that were here and we kind of we put something else on the board. It was a square instead of it wasn't a circle. Let me make it a square here. We put a square, and then we actually used black squares. And what we did is we tried to find things that were similar, right? So like, for instance, the DREP failing to vote is a negative incentive, and it's on the DREP, right? So this is a DREP incentive, or a DREP negative incentive, right? And what we tried to do is we tried to say, and then we have, this is an end user negative incentive. Right. And so what we tried to do is we've tried to kind of classify things in a category, if you will,
Gotcha.
where
Mhm.
things came together and where they didn't. And then what we did is we would take, we would take you could either take the card itself, or you could take this sort of combined card. Because when we had 10, 15, 20 people going through it, you would see like 7 or 8 people had the same rough idea. So it all kind of
Right.
coalesced into one. And then we
Mhm.
took that one and then we decided, does that need to be an MVG or post MVG, right? This happens. We already know this DREP negative incentive. Well, that one's actually, this is post MVG because it's not in that one. This end user negative incentive is an MVG. It's in the SIP 1694 right now, right? Now, something like what Chris is talking about here with the multiple DREPs, that, this is the idea of community driven councils or enforcement that can't possibly be on chain, so it has to go into the off chain area, right?
Right.
And again, this is, this just happens to be my idea, is that there's a negative incentive for a punitive cost to failure to vote. Some people, and I have heard it, and to steel man the opposite argument, is the ultimate penalty for that is that your voters leave. And I do agree with that steel man, but I will say that I think both are important. So from my perspective, I think I think the thought that your voters are going to leave you should drive you to vote, but should we have some degree of a lapse of care in the community, that that there be some kind of negative incentive for you not participating if you've registered as a DREP, whatever that looks like. I don't have a number or a whatever, but just that, I like there being layers of rewards and penalties for people, because they kind of work together. They work as a tapestry. They hold each other up,
Right.
to do it. So my take, but that's my take there.
Yeah. I agree at a level. It's interesting to think about. Yeah, you need ways to. How do you guarantee engagement when people can go to sleep in a situation?
You need multiple knobs to turn, right? And
Yeah,
that's all I'm
you need
looking
knobs to
at
turn.
is
Right.
that knob can be set to 0, but it's still in there in the system that, hey, if a DREP doesn't vote for 3 epochs or 5 epochs, then, well, right now nothing happens, but the code's still
Something
there.
happens.
And then
Yeah.
we find out it becomes a problem, and then we say, oh, well, it is a problem. Okay, so now if a DREP doesn't vote after 5, epochs, well, then there's this penalty to the DREP, whatever it is.
Totally.
Right. If they, one of the things is they get to vote for their own money from the treasury, potentially. That's one of the possible positive incentives. If that's the case, that would be post MVG, because it would actually be a governance action that would go through the process. If that were the case, then what we would end up with is possibly that there's a rule there that says, hey, this is only for DREPs that vote every epoch, and if you don't vote every epoch, you don't get your share of whatever this is that we voted for.
That's a good one.
You see what I mean? So that's why it's layers on layers, right? And that's what I'm looking for, is trying to come up with these layers. So
I'm definitely of the frame of thought that anyone who's a DREP should have. There should be some collateral in the game for almost every aspect of governance, for a multitude of reasons. So if they're not going to vote for 5 epochs, well, I think that displays pretty obvious lack of interest. You lose that collateral,
right?
Or you have to re-register or some kind of, you know what I mean?
Right.
Something.
One of the things that was floated is potentially losing your delegation, but there was negatives to that too. The negatives to losing your delegation is that now you've caused somebody who thinks they're delegated to find out later that they're not delegated because they can't withdraw their rewards, and they've sat on the sidelines because they didn't know. So that's not necessarily a good one. It's kind of a
Right.
last resort one. That one was talked about to put maybe in that temperature check bucket of the sorry, no confidence.
Yeah.
It
Gotcha.
was talked about
Yeah.
that if no confidence reaches a certain level, that you could potentially reset some or all DREP delegation. It's like, that would obviously be very high. Like, they would have to be such unrest that that they're talking about taking away everybody's all the DREP delegations. But that's something that could be implemented. It's a possibility. So something to talk about.
Is there
Definitely, I like
currently a
that.
lot of much
Mhm.
discussion on governance on a side chain?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say much. I would say that some elements make sense for a sidechain if you need some sort of public vote where where that would happen. But honestly, this is actually more the drip drop style voting. These are elected representatives. So you want their vote to be on chain. You want to know exactly what they did and why they did it, right? So this is not that, but there's a potential to use like the Midnight sidechain to do sort of more traditional voting, like finding your representatives for something else, but not for this. The areas and sidechains is a good one. I think we should actually do I'm going to do tooling tomorrow, tomorrow
Okay,
afternoon,
cool.
because we're doing the Longmont conference wrap up tomorrow, and I'm going to do the breakout room on tooling, community tooling. That's a great place for side chains. That's probably
What's the Longmont conference?
Longmont conference was where we went to Denver and the
Oh
SIP 60.
that's right.
Okay.
Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
So it's called the Longmont conference. So that's where that was. So tomorrow we're doing the wrap up Zoom call on that.
Sweet.
And in that Zoom call, I'm going to do community tooling. So that's my job, my breakout room that I'm going to do. And that's a great spot to look at side chains. And I do think that is one of the most important aspects. We did have a discussion on like what it would look like if we set up a side chain and did it for governance actions. And you had two different options. You could either pay a fee, or a deposit, whichever. I know that's not been decided yet. A fee or a deposit to enact a governance action, and you don't need to do anything else but that. Like, I want this governance action. I'm putting it out there. Here's my fee or deposit, whichever one it is, and whatever that number is. And now it's a governance action that you have to vote on. So that's one way you can go. Now, what if the alternative is you have a side chain, and in the side chain you have this whole process with a government? Because somebody could say, hey, that's only for rich guys. It's a perfectly valid argument to that, is that's only for rich people. Because if you make that too low, then you've got spam all over your spam governance actions every day just for no reason.
Yep.
And if you make it too high, well, it's just for rich people. So the alternative was, if you don't want to go through this other path, then you can still just raise the funds and put your governance action in. That's fine. But here's an alternative for you. Come through this process on a side chain where you put a very small amount of ADA down to open a link to your proposal on the side chain, right? And then now your proposal's in the side chain, and you go through a process where it's reviewed, and you have committees that look at it, and it gets changed and abridged and cleaned up, and it matches everything. And I did write something up here about that, utilizing a proposal management system following a best practice guideline. That's actually what this one is up here. That's this whole idea of this side chain. You go through a process, and your bill becomes stronger because you collaborated on it with others in the community, and then you go through this process, kind of graduate through this process. And then there's a multi-sig on the other side that does not require you to pay the big, huge deposit. So it allows, if you just want to throw your money out there to do a proposal, fine. And that's why I actually think that should be my thought, it should be a fee, not a deposit, my opinion. Whereas the other one, it could basically be that that it's a deposit, or that it's entirely, the fee is simply waived if you have gone through the sidechain process. So that's just one example of how a sidechain can be very useful in this, because you don't want that stuff on the main chain because it would pollute the main chain, but to have all of that on a side chain that has its own level of consensus, that you can see the process as it went through, it can make a lot of sense. So again, one area, a possibility, nothing that this is not in stone at all yet, but it's an area that, that I'm
participate in the thing you're doing tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody's welcome. Everybody's welcome to the thing tomorrow.
The stuff you're talking about right now with the sidechain stuff is what I spent a lot of time last night really thinking about. And there's just a lot of ways that there's a lot of possibilities.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you could run nodes not dissimilar from stake pools on the main chain. You could have, the whole delegation process could be totally different, where staking rewards for people who delegate to those governance nodes. Have one Epic base from the main chain. The ADA you have on the main chain, you have GADA on the governance chain.
So, and that is interesting, but there's negatives to moving all of governance off of the main chain, because there is definite negatives to that, because you do lose a degree of security when you don't perform your governance actions on main chain. So it is interesting, but there's limitations. But again, you're hitting on some good things and some important points, that yes, there can be a whole incentive structure to working in a side chain that's separate from the main chain, that can be funded any number of different ways. Right. So, you mentioned
basically the fee structure. I think there's going to need to be fees somewhere, because I think governance is absolutely going to require treasury to be able to fund things like bug bounties and recompense on different things, and committee involvement, because I definitely see multiple committees for various tasks.
Yeah, and that's something that can be MVG, and that's I'm gonna boldly put that there. Again, this is a small group. We have to workshop this further, but this is something that is surfaced in this group, is that fees to create a governance proposal, not just a deposit but a fee, could go a long way, because you're right, it can be an area for it goes to the treasury, and because it goes to the treasury, that those fees could be used to fund various governance options and operations that go around the making sure that these proposals are right. So
I love that. Yeah, these triggers, any area to force people to get their thumb on the pulse.
So I'm gonna put a little star on that one, just because I think it's important. It's not something that that's not something that's in the MVG right now, but it's something that we surfaced that should at least be discussed further in the community for the MVG. To me, this is a success in even a small workshop, and that's the whole point of having these, is talking these things out, because here you go. There's something that surfaced that we can bring to the broader community and say, hey, and it might get shot down. That's okay. At least we surfaced it and we brought it up and we tried to move it forward. So and with that, I'm gonna, because the town hall ran extra long today, so we're gonna try to wrap up today here pretty quick. The final exercise is our debrief exercise. It's our what, so what, now what. So I'd like you guys, if you could just take a moment. What did you learn today? Is your first block here. So if you just grab a sticky note, what did you learn today? Yeah, long way to go. So the so what area is, how does it make you feel? Like, it's what you learned. How does it make you feel? And then the now what is just, what's your next step? So how does this make you feel? And then your last category is, what's your next step? And I'll just throw it out there that next week I'm going to go ahead and do a session here on community tooling to follow up on the session I'm doing tomorrow. So from what I learned there tomorrow, we'll gather here next week and we'll try to do another one of these. And the session next week will be on community tooling. All right. And with that, guys, I'm going to call it a day. Thank you all so much for participating. Appreciate your help today, and we'll see you guys next week.